Can BRICS reshape the financial world order? BRICS's first summit since its expansion in 2023 discussed proposals to reduce reliance on US dollar and SWIFT system. BRICS has almost doubled in size in 2024, and its economic and political influence is growing. The group of emerging economies now represents about half the world's population and more than a quarter of global gross domestic product. But critics say there are deep differences between its members, and the alliance has struggled to define its purpose. BRICS largely wants to reduce global reliance on the US dollar. Launching a rival to the SWIFT international payment system was high on its summit's agenda in Russia this year. Can China stabilize its property market? Plus, tech giants are going nuclear. The BRICS bloc can play a significant role in challenging the dominance of the US dollar. This will occur by increasing their country's holdings of gold and key currencies like the Chinese yuan rather than the US dollar, and forming non-dollar trade agreements. Needless to say, the founding countries of the BRICS bloc do not have much affection for the US and its policies, especially Russia and China. After the US government froze Russia's $300 billion liquid foreign exchange reserves following its invasion of Ukraine in 2022, with an intent to give some of them to Kyiv, Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested investing in hard assets like gold or oil. According to reports, as of 2024, the central bank gold holdings of BRICS nations plus Egypt accounted for more than 20% of all the gold held in the world's central banks. Russia, India, and China rank in the top 10 for central bank gold holdings. Despite the US dollar's dominance for more than 80 years, its share of global monetary reserves has decreased since the early 2000s, from about 73 to 58% in favor of gold and non-traditional currencies. Several countries have reduced their holdings of US Treasury bonds, with some, like Russia and Turkey, bringing them down to zero. 7 countries that were among the main and traditional owners of US Treasury bonds have reduced their holdings by a total of $2 trillion during the past decade, including Japan, Russia, China, and even Saudi Arabia and the UAE. As a result, it is noted that while the US public debt has doubled over the past decade from $17.8 trillion to more than $35 trillion today, the value of Treasury securities held by non-Americans remained unchanged at $8 trillion, revealing a drop from 45 to 23% in US bonds held by foreigners out of the total number of bondholders. The US has used a carrot-and-stick approach to impose its policy on the Arab world. Bribery in the form of US aid has long been used with compliant regimes and governments. Egypt is a good example in this regard, as the Egyptian army has enjoyed a yearly aid of $1.3 billion since the 1979 Egypt-Israel peace treaty, and remained compliant with US policies in the region. Alternatively, the US has utilized the stick against regimes that sought to implement an independent policy. The US has indirectly punished countries by removing them from the SWIFT payment system and preventing them from transferring any funds between banks, constituting a severe national blow to countries like Iran. The US has also weaponized direct sanctions against regimes that do not conform to its policies, which it has imposed on those countries' investments, whether in US markets or those of its allies. Countries like Iran, Syria, and Iraq have been notable targets of these notorious practices. Indeed, such measures imposed by Washington would not have succeeded without the stature of the US dollar. The bloc has proposed the creation of a cross-border payment initiative, BCBPI, which aims to minimize reliance on the sole cross-border payment system dominating now, and to encourage countries to use their national currencies in international intra-trade. BRICS has also announced its plans to establish an alternative to the US-controlled SWIFT system. It will allow its members, who otherwise have no effective way of controlling or influencing the decision-making body that governs SWIFT's operations, to transfer payments between their country's central banks without barriers. For such purposes, BRICS plans to try blockchain technology along with central bank digital currencies, CBDC. While it has not yet been confirmed whether discussion of a unified currency for the bloc's countries is on the agenda, if such a plan were to be adopted, it would be a pivotal and strategic move that would further weaken the US dollar's position. Optimistic observers believe that the BRICS bloc can contribute effectively to removing the dollar from its throne. So what can the BRICS countries do in this regard? The countries comprising the BRICS alliance enjoy tremendous advantages that could enable them to achieve their objectives of a multipolar world, as well as a fair financial and trade system for the benefit of the global South. During the August 2023 summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, BRICS invited 6 countries to join the bloc. 4 new members were officially confirmed: Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, and the UAE. Argentina declined the invitation, and Saudi Arabia is still considering joining. With this expansion, BRICS Plus, as it is informally known today, constitutes about 46% of the world's population and 28% of the global economy, and its GDP on a purchasing power parity basis, PPP, is 35%, exceeding that of the G7, which barely hits 30% of the global GDP, PPP. As for energy sources, the bloc members own 47% of the world's oil reserves and 50% of its natural gas reserves. BRICS members are working towards deepening intertrade using local currencies instead of the US dollar, including buying and selling energy sources without resorting to the dollar. The greenback is the sole currency used in the petrodollar trade, while the largest buyers, as well as the largest sellers, are BRICS members, assuming that Saudi Arabia officially joins the bloc. BRICS also established its own bank, the New Development Bank, which aims to compete with the World Bank and the IMF. While BRICS members might be split on the creation of a shared currency, many are in agreement that they must not be dependent on a single currency like the US dollar. As the US continues to face greater international isolation for its support for Israel, many hopeful observers in the Arab world view the erosion of the dollar's dominance as the beginning of the end of US global hegemony.